All right. I guess we will get started. Cece, you've got the incoming people?
I do, thanks.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Deb Hodgson. I am co-founder of New Hampshire for Safe Technology, along with Jen White and Lori Schreier. And my unplanned journey over the past 6 years is what has led me here today. In the fall of 2017, we had scheduled to have our home measured for wireless on our return from a hiking trip out west. I had planned to come off blood thinners, and I was aware that wireless can thicken the blood, so I thought it was a prudent precaution to take. I had also been having issues with insomnia, constant ringing in the ears, heart arrhythmia, palpitations, tooth and jaw pain, dry eye, facial flushing, dizziness, and blood pressure issues. I had developed severe pressure headaches that felt like my brain was swollen or on fire. I had great difficulty thinking, speaking, and remembering. I even got lost several times in the town I've lived in for nearly 40 years. I did not yet know that it was all related until we removed the wireless from our home and cars. My health quickly improved. My seemingly unrelated symptoms disappeared as well. Interestingly, the plant in my kitchen that had sat there doing nothing for over a year suddenly grew 15 inches in just 2 months. That was an eye-opener to everyone in the family, as it's much easier to believe what you can actually see. Realizing this is an issue that ultimately affects everyone, I stepped way out of my comfort zone with a little push from reading EMF Off by Olga Sheen and the support of Cece, despite knowing others will certainly think I must be crazy. I held 2 public screenings of Generation Zapped and reached out to many, including legislators. My state rep, Patrick Abrami, was truly exceptional. He actually listened and responded. He investigated the science. Then he and New Hampshire State Senator Tom Sherman together were successful getting New Hampshire to pass the first U.S. law to begin addressing technology safety. The New Hampshire Commission on Health and Environmental Effects of Wireless Technology was established in the fall of 2019 and produced a groundbreaking report in the fall of 2020. The New Hampshire Commission report is a great place to become informed, to empower you to protect yourself, your family, and community by becoming aware and learning how to use technology safely. We at New Hampshire for Safe Technology, along with Cece Doucette of Mass for Safe Technology, are supporting the Commission's work through community information sessions like this, and we thank you all for being here. Our speaker today is none other than Cece Doucette. Cece has been a tireless supporter to us in New Hampshire, as well as just about everyone on this issue, and we are all very grateful to her. Welcome, Cece.
Thanks so much, Deb. It's an honor to be here with you and for everybody who might watch this after tonight's presentation. I'm going to go ahead and do a screen share. And everything that we go over tonight, we'll send these slides out to you after the program in the next day or two. So feel free to use it as a launch point into your own investigation if you're new to this conversation, or if there's some newer information that perhaps hadn't come past you. Hopefully you'll be able to get right to it and research that a little bit more. So thank you everybody for taking the time to join us, and especially to Deb. You know, she has been such a trooper. When we talk about that New Hampshire Commission report, she volunteered her time to attend every one of the 13 commission meetings that they held, and she took minutes. And a great portion of that New Hampshire Commission report is because she stood by her legislature and volunteered to help. So that's what activism looks like today, getting it done. So Deb, thank you so much for everything you and your colleagues have done. Okay, so this MTPW after my name means that I had the privilege of earning a master's in technical and professional writing from Northeastern University, where I also earned my undergraduate in communication studies. And I never imagined that I would be applying this skill set to doing the technology safety work that I'm doing today. But I'm so grateful that that is my background because I use these skills every day. So when my kids were little, I helped to revive our local education foundation. It had gone defunct, and that was at the time when the industry was bringing in the 21st century classroom. And we are in a small town in Ashland, Massachusetts, and our budgets had already been cut to the bone year after year after year. And we certainly didn't have the funding to get what we were being told our children would need to succeed in the world today. So good to be parents, we jumped in and started doing fundraising, and we got wireless infrastructure, and we got iPads and Chromebooks and smart boards and minis and what we thought was all this great new technology. Then one night at book group, my girlfriend Wendy is an electrical engineer. And she and all four of her children had chronic Lyme disease. And so Wendy, being an engineer, starts going at it systematically. What can be happening inside the body to cause these effects? And she wound up reading a book called Zapped by Anne Louise Gittleman. And she, at book group, said, "Hey, ladies, you know what? I think there might be something wrong with wireless." And I just made a mental note of it, but it wasn't long after that that something else crossed my desk. And by this point, I was the grant coordinator for our school district, but the American Academy of Environmental Medicine was saying, please, school superintendents, do not bring wireless into your schools. So the American Academy of Environmental Medicine is the medical doctors who get the conundrum cases that other people have no idea how to address. And they're telling us, don't let Wi-Fi into the schools. So that really caught my eye. And I thought, wow, I wonder if there's any science to this. So being a tech writer, I'm thinking, let me just go take a look. And I was just astounded that I didn't have to look very far. There are literally thousands of peer-reviewed, published studies in highly credible journals, not the fringe journals that industry will try and distract us with, but actual real medical journals, thousands of studies showing extensive harm, and we'll walk you through the long-term and the short-term harm from today's wireless technology. So it was not an easy conversation to have. It never is, because we've all been conditioned by industry that if somebody says, hey, you know, I think we might have a problem with wireless, everybody's conditioned by now to go, ooh, tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist, I don't have to listen to that. So when I started reading the science for myself, I worked with my schools, and we became the first in the United States to even have this little sign hanging in our classrooms with best practices for mobile devices. And it says to turn off these devices when we're not using them, turn the Wi-Fi on only when needed, and always place the mobile device on a solid surface, not on your body. And we'll go into more detail on that in just a minute. So we became the first in the US to even have this sign hanging in our classrooms. And then when I was helping to run the Education Foundation, I served alongside our state senator, Karen Spilka, who's now our Senate president. And I went to her local coffee hours, and I brought the science, I brought our little sign, and I brought a meter, and I measured the radiation coming off of her cell phone and her district director's laptop. Both devices went right off the charts into the red zone just from these common exposures from a cell phone and a laptop. So Senator Spilka looked at me like, really? And I said, yes, and nobody knows. Is there something that you can do from where you sit that would at least give the public the right to know? Just like with alcohol, tobacco, drugs, pornography, gambling, adults will make their choices, but we need to know the risks that go along with those addictive behaviors. And we need to know the risk because radio frequency radiation that's used to carry our signals back and forth is actually hitting the same receptors in the brain, we now know scientifically, as all those other addictive substances. So there's much more to it, and we'll look at the science. But Senator Spilka put me with an attorney in her office, and together we crafted a very simple bill that said, look, it looks like we've got something here. Let's bring the right minds together at the state level, take a look, and see what we need to do. Well, we have had legislation on wireless technology safety in Massachusetts for 10 years. And although we've been congratulated to get it out, some of our bills out of committee, they've never been enacted into a law. Yet in New Hampshire, when Deb brought this issue up with her state rep, Patrick Abrami, he went and investigated. And then he had this major wow moment, and he started crafting a bill. Deb introduced him to me. They hopped in his car from New Hampshire, drove down to my house in Massachusetts, and Deb and I spent the afternoon with her state rep, sitting at my kitchen table, helping him to connect the dots on what is really going on with wireless technology. And we'll give you some more details on his bill too. But we actually got that bill passed into law in New Hampshire in 7 months' time. So it's important to understand the systems through which change happens. On this journey, I have had the privilege of connecting with many of the world's leading doctors and scientists and advocates, and I helped to form a nonprofit out of Europe called Wireless Education. And we have literally built off-the-shelf training where your entire workforce, your school, your municipality could take this training just like they do with other trainings like, anti-bullying, physical restraint, mandated reporter, ethics, all of that. We have a module already built to train those who need to come into the fold on this issue. And then when I first fell down the rabbit hole here in about 2013, I was the only person I knew who I could talk to about this. And for the first couple of years, I really wasn't 100% sure about what I was even finding. But now that I've been studying it for going on 10 years now, I know conclusively just exactly where the facts are and how to direct other people to them. So we had gotten tipped off that there was going to be a public forum at our state house. And so I went down to the state house, and lo and behold, Dr. Deborah Davis, who's a Nobel Peace Prize co-laureate on climate change, she put together a panel of experts and brought them to the Massachusetts State House. We had Frank Clegg, who's the retired president of Microsoft Canada. We had Dr. Sharma from India, whose responsibility was to recommend these emissions and at what level. And India's was up where the US and Canada and England and other countries still are. India looked at the science and brought it down 90%, at least on paper. They're still in the throes of figuring out how to get away from industry long enough to implement it. But it did show that with political will, there is much we can do. So when I went down to the State House, I was just so humbled that it was a standing room only crowd in there with people from all over who knew about this issue. So it was very validating for me. And ultimately, a bunch of us started getting together on a more routine basis, and we formed Massachusetts for Safe Technology. So you can go out to this link and you can quickly get to the science. You can find out when our upcoming webinars are. You can see all the inroads we've been making at the state level here in Massachusetts. You can see other events that are happening. And we have a news page because when we open this conversation, the industry tells our towns, oh, here's an application. We're going to put cell towers in. And if anybody says anything, it's just the NIMBYs, the not in my backyard people. So we can just ignore them. So we collect up all the news stories, all the cable shows and other programs that are going on. And on our news page, your legislators, your local municipal leaders could quickly look and say, whoa, it's not just our town. Look at all these towns who are already making inroads. So please use the resources at Massachusetts for Safe Technology. You don't have to be from our state. They're there for everybody to take inspiration from and to take the facts from. So we have how to get started. We have tools for working this through for your loved ones and for your community. I like to include this link to the Health and Buildings Roundtable Conference held down at the National Institutes of Health because it's highly credible. And because all of our talks had to be 10 minutes or less. So I do the opening remarks, and then we have Frank Clegg from Microsoft Canada, who went and researched this industry after he retired, and now he speaks out publicly against the harm, and that yes, his industry can do much better if given a nudge. We also had Martin Pall, Dr. Martin Pall, who's one of the world's leading scientists and researchers on this. We had Theodora Scorado, who works with Dr. Davis, the Nobel Peace Prize co-laureate on climate change. And they have established this nonprofit called Environmental Health Trust, which is arguably the world's greatest database on this topic, and think tank. They have scientists and doctors and advocates and incredible resources on their board of directors and their business advisors. So really wonderful resources here. We also had Peter Sullivan speak on our panel, and I think I first found Peter's work through a talk he gave out somewhere that was on YouTube. And his story is really fascinating. He used to be a fighter pilot. So, you know, the Top Gun guys are up there close to the really high natural electromagnetic fields up there. And then he's inside of a plane that has radar, which is what we're talking about when we talk about wireless radiation. It came out of our militaries as radar, and then industry brought it into the commercial sector. So Peter wound up getting very sick. And after he left the Air Force, he went as an engineer to Silicon Valley, and it was like his friends who invented the cell phone. So Peter has been knee deep in technology. He always had the best of everything and the first of everything. And then he started getting really sick, dropping unexplained weight. His teeth started getting brittle. When his two sons came up through the preschool years, both of them were diagnosed on the autism spectrum. So Peter did what a lot of parents would do, and they will transition the family to a clean organic diet to kind of stop the environmental toxins coming in the food sources. And then he actually did the heavy metal detox to get all those heavy metals from all the exterior pollutants that have lodged themselves into the brain and the body. And today he tells families those are important steps to take, but the first step should be a digital detox. And you can start with nighttime and make sure everything that radiates in your house is not. And as intimidating as that might sound in this day and age, it's totally doable, and will teach you ways to have amazing technology, even faster, more reliable, with more secure data and more secure security. And it's more sustainable, it's more energy efficient, and it's not rocket science. We'll go into more detail in a minute, but seriously, literally, all you have to do is plug in an Ethernet cable to the back of your router and buy little adapters for each one of your devices. Plug them in, turn off the antennas, and that is how we have safe technology. So one of the big gaps we had when I first started learning about this is we could tell so many people were getting impacted because it's cumulative. The longer we leave ourselves exposed to this toxin, the more damage we are likely to experience. So people were getting sick, and nobody's doctors had been trained on how to recognize, diagnose, treat, and prevent these sicknesses. So throughout this conversation, we hear a lot of different terms that come basically down to meaning the same things. Microwave radiation is radio frequency radiation, and it all pulses these electromagnetic fields of radiation out into our world, at us, into us, through us, and everything in their path. So we have EMF for electromagnetic fields. We have RF for radio frequency radiation, which is, if you were to look at something called the electromagnetic spectrum that shows all of the natural and man-made energies, you see that these man-made wireless energies are in the microwave spectrum. So it's all pretty much one and the same. But now we have professional training available. The EMF Medical Conference 2021 ran for 2 years, and there were 24.5 continuing medical education credits. Those did expire in July, and we do not know of another EMF Medical Conference being planned. They take years and big funding to put together. So the great news today is that Elizabeth Kelly, who is the executive director of that conference, has now taken the entire conference, all of the lectures, all of the promotional videos leading up to the conference and all of the live panels that were held at the conference with the experts, and put them all online for free, no charge. So now you can go find out about brain cancers, you can find out about infertility, you can find out about electromagnetic sensitivity and everything in between. And most of the videos, maybe they're 18 minutes or a half an hour, maybe some are an hour, but definitely things that you can fit into your calendar at your leisure. And you can share it with your own healthcare providers and your town's first responders, because they have no idea that people are getting sick from their wireless. And in worst case scenarios, it's like where we were with Lyme disease a decade ago. If the first responders and the doctors don't know about microwave sicknesses, then what do? In worst case, they say, oh, it must all be in your head because our tests are coming up fine. Must be all in your head. And then they send you off to a psych ward where you are in a facility with microwave radiation pulsating all around you, and you're getting sicker instead of the medical care you need to get better. So we're so grateful to Libby Kelly for bringing us this conference, and now for making it available for everybody in the world to be able to participate. And I was honored to be an invited lecturer at that conference too, on state and local policy. So that's my story, and that's how I got involved. So now let's share with you how our schools became the first in the United States to even have our little sign that hangs in our classrooms. So for anybody with us who has an iPhone, I invite you to take that out and go into settings. And in all of our devices, you can type in your, do a search online and type in the make and model of your device, and then type RF exposure. And that will typically bring you to the legal fine print. Here, even on the iPads, their warnings used to include seizures, blackouts, eye strain. And I know of 2 children in neighboring towns who had their first seizures using the iPad. So from an iPhone, go to settings, a little ways down, hit general. From general, go all the way down to legal and regulatory. And when you hit legal and regulatory, it brings up the next screen. And about 4 down from the top, you will see RF exposure. This is the radio frequency radiation, or two-way microwave radiation, that they politely call energy, because it is a man-made, invisible light form of energy. But what that fine print tells us is a couple of important things. One, they tested this device at a distance from the body. So if you're holding it in your hand with those antennas radiating, if you're tucking it in your bra, in your shirt pocket, in your suit pocket, in your waistband, in your back pocket, you are exceeding the Federal Communications Commission's public radiation exposure limits. And the kicker is those were never even biologically safety tested. They were based only on heat. How much heat would it take from one device to raise the temperature of your skin in 6 or 30 minutes? Has nothing to do with the neurosynapses going on in our brain. How much heat would it take to raise the temperature of the gel inside of a mannequin's head? So really, no biological safety testing has ever been done. And then when you read a little further along in the fine print, it says to reduce your exposure, use a hands-free option, because it's common sense. Once we know something is emitting microwave radiation, common sense, don't touch it. So it suggests that you use a hands-free option like the speakerphone or a headset. And I'm gonna stop my screen share just for a couple minutes to give you a couple of demonstrations. So if you were to use a headset, oftentimes these devices come with a wire headset where you plug the wire into the radiating device, and then it goes up into your head. One of the properties we need to understand about this microwave radiation, or any kind of radio frequency, is that it amplifies around metal. So when you plug this radiating right into your device, it's like, woohoo, party on, I'm going right up to the brain now. So just take heart that everything we have messed up we know how to fix. It just takes a lot of courage to entertain that, yeah, there's a lot of science here. And just maybe if I take some baby steps, try a couple of different things, maybe my symptoms or my loved one's symptoms might start going away. So this is, I'm going to give you a demonstration of a hollow tube or an air tube headset. It still plugs into your device. It still has a wire that goes to your headset, but here it's got nice volume control and muting. But these little ferrite beads break the radiation signal from coming up, but the acoustics still come up nice and strong through these hollow tubes, kind of like a doctor's stethoscope. So you put these up and notice that these have no metal. They're just rubber tips and plastic tubing. So the goal is to create as much distance from something that's radiating as you can, but really learn to make choices where you're actually not radiating yourself. So that's the legal fine print. And it was when my school saw that legal fine print that they went, uh-oh, we have a legal responsibility here or a liability. And that's how we became the first in the United States to even have our little sign with baby steps toward best practices. So once I started figuring this out and I learned that there were radio frequency detection meters, I purchased one. And this is the one that was recommended at the EMF Medical Conference. It's called the Safe and Sound Pro 2 Radio Frequency Radiation Broadband Detection Meter. See how it's in the green? Knowing what I've learned over the years, I've done everything that I can to protect myself and my family and our pollinators out in the yard. And, you know, it affects every living cell. So right now in my house, I'm at 3, and the unit of measurement is something called a microwatt per square meter. So within 3 feet of air, how much radiation? I'm usually under 10, so it just jumped up to 5. You know, we have a couple of digital meters on the far side of our house for our water, or I'm sorry, our gas and our electric and solar meters. And my neighbors around me, I'm fortunate that they're not right on top of me, but I still get some additional stray signal that comes through. So we were at 5, and I'm taking my cell phone out of airplane mode. I'm not doing anything other than letting the antennas come online. So I'm gonna put this, ooh, baby, I'm gonna put it back in airplane mode. And we can see it dissipates as the radiation quits from this. We were at 5. I turned on my cell phone that has a cellular and data antenna, a Bluetooth antenna, a Wi-Fi antenna, a locator antenna, a hotspot antenna. And fortunately, I knew enough not to invest in a 5G phone because those have additional antennas. And so the message is not no technology, it's safe technology. Once we know this thing is radiating, it's common sense. Why leave all those antennas on when I'm not even using them? So I keep my phone in airplane mode as a rule. I can forward my cell phone calls right to my landline. And it was meant to be mobile technology. I'm not on the go, so I don't need mobile technology in my home or my office. So a moment ago, we were at 5 microwatts per square meter. I turned on my cell phone and it went to 3,180,000 microwatts per square meter. 3 million. And in the scientific literature, in our indoor sleeping areas, they want us to be at 10 or less. Some people who have developed electromagnetic illnesses with certain frequencies can still feel okay if it's at 100 or less indoors, but the science is recommending in our sleeping areas 10 or less, and one cell phone brought us to 3 million. So that's the reality of the world that we have been talked into today. But the good news is, again, with just a little education, to absorb it, and we know it's a lot to take on. It's like drinking water out of a fire hose, but better that you know, and you know where to go to get good, credible information. And then you can start taking your baby steps to protect yourselves. So I'm going to go back into my screen share. And so I went after a grant in my town. And again, that was not an easy conversation, but it is so much easier today because all of our libraries are having to reinvent themselves because not everybody is reading books from a book. So they're reinventing themselves. Many libraries today have a library of things. My daughter, for example, is on a wait list for a power washer at her library. And so we became the first in the United States in my little town of Ashland. I went after a grant. Again, not an easy conversation back in 2016. Took me 3 grant cycles. I had to educate each one of the members of our local government, our select board. And ultimately, they gave me enough funding for 1 radio frequency meter. I wanted 2, one for the schools, one for our library, so the entire community can share this piece of equipment. So they were still a little uncertain about it, but they were starting to piece together that, yeah, there is something here. So they said, we'll give you a grant for 1 meter if the library board of trustees agree to take this into circulation. And I even got the idea for this because when the energy industry started peddling their CFL light bulbs, those swirly ones that, by the way, throw off a lot of toxic man-made dirty electricity, one of their marketing strategies was to put a kilowatt meter in a case on loan in our public libraries. So I knew we had 1 meter already. Let's get a second one. So it took me 3 tries. Our library voted it in. And now the Newton Public Library, a doctor and I went after a grant from our state level cultural council. And then out in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, a lot of citizens got really sick when Verizon put a cell tower up on top of their neighborhood. And so citizens there asked the library to invest in one of these. So they just bought it outright with library funding. So it's not a big ask these days. If you want to go talk to your library about this, they may be able to fund it. If there's a hardship, the library, not the citizen, but the library is welcome to reach out to the Environmental Health Trust. And they have a small grant fund, and there may be funds available to help fund a meter. So your whole community can just go start measuring, and then we can find out what we need to do with that. Sorry about that. I usually take that off the hook. Okay, so our cable stations are one of the last bastions of independent reporting available in our countries today. We started out here in the US with maybe 50 mainstream media outlets, and they got bought up, and they got bought up, and they got bought up. And now we're left with 4 to 6 big conglomerations that own just about all of mainstream media, so they control the narrative. We only get the messaging that they want us to hear. So sit down for an hour of prime time and count how many telecom ads that you see. That's who's controlling the messaging. So our cable stations are wonderful. Mine here, WACA in Ashland, has brought resources to my home. We did a 23-minute public service announcement where I walk through my home and I show common exposures and then offer suggestions for remediation. And I now have a series that I do every couple weeks out at WCCA TV in Worcester, Massachusetts. And our episodes are only 28 minutes long. So we bring in experts and we bring in citizens who have been harmed by this so that they can share their stories and teach people what they've been through so others might recognize what may be happening in their own lives and then share strategies for how to coexist in this world of electro pollution that we find ourselves in. So feel free to use your local cable stations. They love it when people come in and say, hey, I want to do a program. And I am more than honored to come and do these kinds of programs with you. So what does the science tell us? Let's look first at the long-term effects. So for years, the industry spun it that, oh, there's no mechanism of harm identified in the scientific literature, so let's keep doing what we're doing. Well, about 20 years ago, the Food and Drug Administration here in the US was learning that it looked like wireless was not harmless. So they commissioned the U.S. National Toxicology Program, which is arguably the gold standard for toxics research in the world, to do a study. And for 20 years, they did a study on cell phones back in the day when 2G or second generation technology and 3G, third generation technology, were the technology of the day. 1G, we started with the old brick phones. 2G, we got to do a little bit of texting. 3G, we got to get on the internet a little bit. 4G, we basically have the entire internet on a computer in our hands or on our wrists. And we'll talk a little bit later about what 5G means. So G in this instance just means generation. So what did the National Toxicology Program find out? Well, they had an unprecedented 3-day peer review at the National Institutes of Health with world-leading experts whose life's work is investigating the biological effects of radiofrequency microwave radiation. At the end of the day, when they put out their final report, they determined clear evidence of cancerous tumors and DNA damage, among other findings. Clear evidence is the highest of 5 categories of harm they could assign. And then the industry gets a hold of it and says, oh, that's just one study. You need to have more studies to corroborate any findings. Well, right on the heels of our cell phone study, the Ramazzini Institute in Italy concluded another multi-million-dollar study on cell tower base stations. And guess what? They found the same thing as we found here: DNA damage, cancers, and so on. And the World Health Organization, as far back as 2011, looked at the research that we had more than a decade ago and said, yeah, it does look like there's something here. And they classified it as a group 2B possible human carcinogen, which is the same category as lead, thalidomide, chloroform, and a whole host of other chemicals that I can't even pronounce. So this is serious when the WHO says this is a group 2B possible human carcinogen. What was missing in 2011 were these studies, the rodent studies, the animal studies that show clear evidence of cancerous tumors and DNA damage. And then infertility, this is another mechanism of harm that is very well understood today. And this was the set of studies that got me on my feet when I started reading them. And I saw that they've taken male human sperm, exposed it to a laptop with the antennas radiating, and it changed the DNA, which is our roadmap to grow a proper human, plant, pollinator, tree, biome of any kind. It's changing the DNA, slowing the motility of the sperm and causing apoptosis or programmed cell death. It was killing off the sperm. All of this happening in just 4 hours of exposure to this man-made radiation. That was the day that I found my voice on this. And even more studies have come out, even in just this year. Another one just came out on the sperm. Kaiser Permanente has done an exceptional study on women who use wireless devices having higher miscarriage rates. So we can't keep messing with our bodies with radiation and expect that we're going to produce the way that we did before we introduced this toxin into our world. And then neurotoxicity. So Dr. Hugh Taylor heads up the OB/GYN program at Yale Medical School, and he has done some of the rodent studies, and he exposed the pregnant mice to this radio frequency from a cell phone for a few hours a day, maybe 9 hours a day. And when those pups were born, he said they were bouncing off the walls, not a care in the world, no regulation, resembling much like a child who's gotten neurotoxic and now has attention deficit or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Dr. Martha Herbert founded the Autism Research Lab at Massachusetts General Hospital. She sees huge connections between what we know happens scientifically with microwave radiation exposures and what she sees in the families in her care. Dr. Martin Pall has culled the research on Alzheimer's, and where, like cancers, it would take decades for Alzheimer's and cancer to rear their ugly heads. Now we are seeing cancers come on faster. We are seeing Alzheimer's that used to hit in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, now coming on in our 60s, our 50s, our 40s, our 30s, and even in rare cases in our 20s. So again, how long can we pollute the environment of the brain with microwave radiation? The Environmental Working Group I first learned about as a mom when I was figuring out the food connection to health and learning about the pesticides that big agra has been putting on our food sources for many years that a lot of people are getting sick from today, the glyphosate and all those related chemicals. So I was very grateful when Working Group put out their Clean 15 and Dirty Dozen fact sheet. They put it out every year to suggest which pieces of produce you should really buy as organically grown as you can, and then which other ones, if you can't afford to buy them organically, are less harmful because the part that you eat is further down in the fruit or the vegetable. And so you've got some protections there. So the Environmental Working Group has gotten some funding, and they now have a PhD working on the wireless radiation issue again. And they are coming out with fact sheets. This is a great one on protecting kids from wireless radiation in school and at home. And here's another one about the radio frequency radiation impact on our central nervous system. So when people start doing that tinfoil hat thing with you, say, I know, we've all been trained to think that, but are you familiar with the Environmental Working Group? And a lot of people are. Say, would you mind if I share a little bit of information from them? And that might be the one thing that they'll listen to. And then we have to acknowledge that children are not just little adults. They are especially vulnerable, and we now know scientifically why. One, their central nervous system is still under development. Their immune system is still under development. Their very DNA is still under development. We know that their skulls are thinner than yours and mine, and we know that their brains have a higher water content. So as Dr. Om Gandhi modeled for us here, these three head models are tilted sideways, and the little yellow dot is the ear. So when you put a cell phone up to an adult head, it is permeating the brain about a third of the way through, pulsating with microwave radiation. On a 10-year-old child, it's going about 3/4 of the way into that child's brain. And on a 5-year-old child, it's going almost into that child's entire brain. So we have got to step up, come way out of our comfort zone, and start protecting especially our children. So in the short term, it's encouraging when we learn that the Americans with Disabilities Act has recognized electromagnetic sensitivities for more than 2 decades now. So you can go look at those resources there. And now we'll talk about what are the short-term effects that a lot of people are feeling but just never knew to connect the dots. And what do we know about the mechanisms of harm? So insomnia is huge. Far too many children and adults simply don't sleep right anymore. And we know scientifically what's happening with this leading factor of microwave radiation. We are light beings. Our body operates off of our circadian rhythm, which operates off of light and darkness. So in the wee hours of darkness, before we introduced all this stuff, the pineal gland would release melatonin from the brain. Melatonin would go in and regulate our sleep, and then also help to escort toxins out of the body from everyday cell repair and regeneration. There's debris left behind. So melatonin regulates sleep and helps to do cleanup out through our bloodstream. Well, what we know scientifically now is that the brain cannot distinguish from natural daylight and this man-made invisible light energy form of microwave radiation. So the brain's over there going, do, when's it gonna get dark so I can release that melatonin? And if we don't learn to create a sleep sanctuary, knowing that this is cumulative. Somebody who's sleeping great tonight could hit that tipping point tomorrow and then start cascading into this. So we know about the melatonin issue, headaches, nosebleeds, ear bleeds, chronic fatigue, pain from unidentified sources. We know scientifically another mechanism of harm, and it's called the rouleau effect. And in my little brain, I remember that because it sounds like the candy Rolos. Remember that? It's this stack of chocolate caramels. Well, that's what's happening to our blood when we microwave it. So our red blood cells are meant to be free floating and bringing oxygen up to our brain, our heart, our lungs, our skin, all of our organs and systems need that oxygen from our free floating red blood cells. When we expose ourselves to these man-made electromagnetic fields, it deforms the blood cells and they start clumping together and they form this chain. And now this chain can't get to where it needs to go to bring the oxygen. So we're depriving our systems from oxygen, and it's causing oxidative stress, which your doctor will tell you is the precursor to most chronic illnesses. So then there's the skin abnormalities. Some people talk about the hot ear from putting a cell phone up. Some people talk about their thigh or their legs going jiggity because it's impacting the nerve cells in there. Some people talk about skin abnormalities with heating, flushing, rashes, tingling. We know now scientifically we have little antennas in the surface of our skin that help us to navigate through our world. That's what's telling us if it's too cold, get inside or put on a coat, or if it's too hot, go cool yourself down so you don't heat your systems up. So we have these beautiful little antennas in the surface of our skin, and they're getting disrupted by this overpowering of microwave radiation. All of our electrical organs, our hearts, our lungs are impacted by this. So some people's heart will start going too fast or too slow based on your individual proclivity or tachycardia or arrhythmias. We can't keep interfering with our own biological systems. And then cognitive impairment, anger and behavior issues, anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, like we have never seen among adults and children. And one of the most heart-wrenching things that I learned at that EMF medical conference from these expert doctors, they were saying if we don't stop doing what we're doing, we are going to see many more of these outbursts of anger and violence in our society, because the science is showing this is changing the gray matter and the white matter of the brain, where we would otherwise be making good decisions. We're losing those capabilities as we further ourselves with microwave radiation. So again, there is excellent science behind all of this. Don't take our word on any of it. Use these slides as your launch point if you haven't already done the deep dive. And sadly, it's not just you and I, it's every biological cell on the planet communicates through these whispered cells, through these symbiotic relationships with the earth. And our pollinators, our birds, our bees, the butterflies, all of it are meant to be in sync with the Earth's electromagnetic field. That's how they navigate. And now we've introduced this huge layer of electrosmog, and they can't get back to their hives, or the signals are so powerful that they're just taking them out directly. And in The Hague in the Netherlands, when they started testing 5G, there were reports of birds by the hundreds just dropping out of the sky, either stunned or killed. Same thing on cruise ships where they put those powerful antennas on top of the ship. The critters are drawn toward it, and then they come up and they get power, you know, they just get overpowered. Sometimes there's like red lights on the cell towers. The birds are drawn to it and they don't know what it is, and they circle until they wear themselves out, and then they go down. So we have got a lot to account for, and with energy consumption, there's a lot on this that the industry has kept from the public. Every one of our devices has dozens of minerals that are extracted through horrific humanitarian methods down in the Congo and elsewhere. And if we really understood what's happening to other people to get what goes into our stuff, we would never just toss a perfectly good device because the industry's selling us the latest and greatest shiny object. We would learn to use everything to its full and useful life and make darn sure it gets recycled at the end of the life. Energy consumption with data warehouses, all of the networks, all of our personal devices, they are really pushing streaming at us these days. And when you go to look to see, hey, who owns the entertainment industry today, you will find it's these same corporations that own the cable industry, the telecom industry, high-tech industries. And so this is just their next revenue stream with streaming. Every time somebody sends and receives something, that is using energy. Every time we charge and recharge and recharge, that's using energy. And we get talked into all these sexy apps, fun, whatever. But they are in the background using energy to do their updates all the time. So again, the message is not no technology. It's safe, responsible technology. And when we know better, we can do better. So that's why we do these free educational webinars. So as you bring people into the conversation, and maybe you're not an expert on this, you don't have to be, just know where to help them to go to connect the dots. So when I was starting to figure all this out, the thing that was niggling in the back of my mind is, look, I can pull up the science and read just how toxic this is. Surely somebody's got our backs on this. And then a couple of years later in 2015, Harvard Law School Center for Ethics came out with this free 29-page report available online called Captured Agency: How the Federal Communications Commission is dominated by the industries it presumably regulates. And when I read Captured Agency, I went, oh, so there is no cavalry coming. There is no knight in shining armor to come protect us. Notice the graphic they chose for the cover. They have a revolving door between industry and our federal agencies. That's who's running our government today. So that's when I realized, okay, there's nobody coming to fix this. And that's when I began to really develop my expertise in this area so that I can share the facts with others. And there are many others who are already documenting this as well. ProPublica, the World Health Organization. If you just do a cursory search on the World Health Organization and radio frequency or electromagnetic fields, the first things that'll come up is some really old stuff that says, gee, it's inconclusive. More science is needed. But how would you know to dig deeper to find this web page? Because now that we have those rodent studies concluded that show clear evidence of cancers and DNA damage, and we've got all the infertility studies and on with electromagnetic sensitivity, how would you even know that the WHO has reopened their investigation? It's currently going on, but sadly, the corruption goes all the way up to the World Health Organization, the United Nations. There are two groups at the WHO. One is heavily funded by industry, and they do not have the experts. And the other group is the experts, but it looks like this new investigation is going to be run by the industry-funded folks. But just know that they have put out a mandate to look at not only cancer, but infertility, the electrohypersensitivity, the impact on the elderly, the impact on children, the impact on people with existing health conditions, because our biological cells only have so much energy, and it's pretty well calibrated to get us through our everyday, and then to do that cell repair and regeneration at night. So when we add a toxin on top of that burden, it becomes really hard for our bodies to keep up with it. So just know there's a good reason why we don't know. And here, this FDA conflict of interest, remember we said it was the FDA that commissioned that $30 million study that found clear evidence of cancers and DNA damage. The folks at the FDA who commissioned that 2 decades ago are long gone. They've either passed away or they've retired. We don't have any experts in our government today with microwave radiation expertise. And in fact, the gentleman who's in charge of the radiation at the FDA today went over to his buddies at the FCC when that study concluded clear evidence of cancer and said, we don't really believe that. Let's just keep doing what we're doing. And one might ask, what would ever possess Dr. Jeffrey Shorin to do that? Well, you don't have to look very far before you discover he's married to a woman who's a partner in a law firm that represents, guess who? Big Wi-Fi and other environmental polluters. So the conflicts of interest are just up and down the chain, from local communities all the way up through our state level agencies in many cases, and all the way up to the federal. And not everybody. There are definitely still some really good public servants out there, but most of them have only gotten their messaging from industry. So that's all the bad news. Let's start looking towards solutions. So if you look at your router on the bottom or the side, you will see there are Ethernet ports. All you have to do is get your Ethernet cables back, right? Plug it in, and then run it to your devices. Now, most people today have more than one mobile device that they would like to hardwire. And so you can get this little thing called an Ethernet switch. Literally, it's little. This one happens to have 5 ports in it. You can get them for schools or offices that have 20 or 30 different ports in it, so you can plug in that many different cables. And then you get a screaming fast signal that's far more reliable. And because your data is not buckshot out through the air, you have much better data security and privacy. And as a Greenpeace analyst told us in 2012, way back before we had all this technology that we found ourselves in the midst of today, they said back in 2012, if the cloud were a country, it would have been the 5th largest consumer of energy in the world. So if we truly care about our natural resources and climate change, then we've got to include technology into that equation. So it's a huge energy consumer. Wireless consumes 10 times more energy than simply choosing hardwired connections and plugging back in. So hardwiring is not rocket science. Then you just need to go into each one of your devices, into your settings, into your router, and turn off the antennas. If you don't know how to get into your account online with your router, just call your internet service provider and they'll walk you through it. So you have to turn off all these multiple antennas, and then you can forward your cell phone to a landline. A lot of people got talked out of their landlines. For $20 or so a month, you can get the landline back if you truly want safe technology. Forward your cell phone calls in your settings, and then you turn off the antennas. And then the third step is pretty critical. If we don't measure, we have no way of knowing if we've gotten all of this invisible toxin out of our living spaces. So you can go to your library, see if they'll invest in one. Some people, $400 or $200. There are smaller meters too that are available out there that'll go green, red, and yellow and tell you. They won't tell you exactly what the readings are, but they'll give you enough of an indication as to whether you're in a safe zone or an unsafe zone. So those list for under 200. And then the one from the conference, the Safe and Sound Pro 2, is about 400. But we also have friends like Lori Schreier, who's part of New Hampshire for Safe Technology. She just got her neighbors together and they just chipped in and they share it amongst themselves. So not unaffordable for most people. And if it is, go to your library. If your library can't afford it, go to the Environmental Health Trust and see if they can get one for your library. So that's what safe technology looks like. It's a mind bender. So again, send people around for the education. We can help connect the dots. So that's the stuff that we have control over. There are several areas that you may or may not have control over. And one is these meters that they put on our house for our utilities for gas, water, electric, solar, and propane. They're starting to roll out their digital or smart meters, and they've been doing it for over a decade now. And they came into our towns and said, look, we know you guys have to pay people to walk the neighborhood to get the readings from your utilities to do your billing. we've got a solution that will allow you to do a cost save, and all of our towns love that. We started with doing a drive-by. So if you put this digital meter on your home, we can now quickly send somebody into the neighborhood, point their scanner from the truck at your home. It will pick up the signal, and then we'll be able to bill you. That will save our town a lot of money. So of course, our towns adopted this. And then they started doing the smart grid, whereby they're getting rid of the people in the trucks on the drive-by. And now all this data is flying through the air constantly and going to a collection station somewhere in the neighborhood. And if your house is the one near that, reader up on a pole somewhere, you're getting everybody's radiation data coming at you. All of this is wireless, which makes it a dream for people who want to hack in. Thieves who might want to see your patterns. When are you coming and going? And they'll know when you're not home. They can back up their truck and take your toys. Terrorists can take down the grid much more easily when it's done through wireless. And then there are these people who will sell your data to third parties who want to know what your buying patterns are, what your usage patterns are, so they can sell you more product. And others will say there are more nefarious things going on with our data and knowing what we're doing every moment of the day. So these utility smart meters are a really raw deal. They pulse radiation 24/7. The industry will say, oh, it's just a couple seconds a day. When I was preparing to testify before the Massachusetts Department of Public Utilities, I took my meter and I sat on the floor in my dining room because there are 2 electric meters mounted outside on that wall. And when I did the math on how many times it was pulsating, 17,000 times a day, this was pulsing radiation inside my home. So there was no shielding. Even though the readings are going outbound, the radiation was coming inside my home. And again, this radiation likes metal. It amplifies on metal, so it can hop on the house wiring and the pipes if it's not done properly, and turn your whole house into a big giant radiating antenna. And then there are far too many reports of fires and explosions and improper grounding with power surges. These things start to blow and then the whole house burns down. And one of the little known properties about these electrical fires is your local fire department can't just come in and hose them down, because as soon as they put fire on that, they can get electrocuted from that water connection to the fire. So they have to contact the utility company, who then has to take the time to power down all the electricity, and that can take up to an hour from the time that smart meter blew up. And in that hour, especially if it's a windy day, that fire can rampage the whole neighborhood. So these are not smart meters to be putting on our homes. And at the medical conference, they were saying that when these smart meters go in, the medical doctors who understand what's happening say we are getting higher rates of sickness from microwaves coming through when these smart meters go on. It's also a huge environmental justice issue, where these toxic industries come into often minority, impoverished, socioeconomically low communities, knowing that people are working 2 or 3 jobs just to keep food on the table and a roof over their head. And they don't have time to tune into what's really going on around them. So they push their toxic products in, they call it a success. And then, for example, in Worcester, Massachusetts, National Grid came in, they went way over budget. And then they wanted to turn around and slap the ratepayers, the customers, with having to pay for their miscalculations on their accounting. Our Attorney General got involved. We had to teach them about the biological effects, because they only knew about economic impact. So it's a nightmare with these environmental justice issues. And then they turn around and say, hey, look, it was a success in Worcester. We're going to roll it out all over Massachusetts. And hey, New York, and hey, Rhode Island, hey, Connecticut, look how great this was in Massachusetts. We're going to roll it out all over your states too. So bless the people on the ground who are educating every one of our states on what these risks truly are, and ask that we stop representing industry's best interest and put the public first, on especially our public utilities. and the privately owned utilities. Many towns have their own private utilities, and they need to be held accountable for safety too. So this is a great TED Talk by Jeremy Johnson, who is a Silicon Valley engineer. He and his medical doctor wife both suddenly became very sick with many of the symptoms we covered earlier. Nothing in her medical background was adding up to why they got so sick so suddenly. And then they discovered a bank of these smart meters had gone in on their condo. So Jeremy does this wonderful TED Talk. He's got a great website. He does consultations with people. You can sign up with him to consult for a half an hour, an hour or so. He's lived this nightmare, so he's got great hands-on and technical expertise. So that's a good one to show to engineers and to physicists and to technologists because they can hear it from one of their own. And then Dr. Alexia McKnight also became brain injured from one of these smart meters that went on her home, to the point where when she was driving and got to an intersection, she could no longer remember if a green light meant stop or go. It was a 50-50 proposition, and thank goodness she got home without injuring herself or anybody else. So, and she's a radiologist. She works with man-made radiation for her career, and she had no idea about this other kind of man-made radiation, the non-thermal, non-ionizing, low-level microwave radiation. So she gives a good TED Talk there as well. So we can control our own devices. We can learn what's going on in our town with the smart meters. And in some towns, you can opt out. In other towns, they say, nope, you have to have it. So that's where the citizens need to band together and bring their voices to make sure we get the right to opt out without being penalized a fee. So the next source that we often don't have much control over once the cell towers go up is these macro cell antennas, the big cell antennas that started in industrial parks far away from our homes, our offices, our schools, our places of worship, our recreational areas. They were in industrial parks 300 feet up in the air, miles apart. And then as they started selling more product, they needed more capacity. So they oversold, so they had to have more cell towers, and then they started bringing them in closer and closer. And now they'll go to a property owner and say, hey, we can paint this the same color as your building. We'll give you a revenue stream. Can we please just have a contract with you to put these up on your building? So it's a great revenue stream. Who wouldn't want that? But we need to know the harm. And so it's critically important to look at the non-industry funded science, which tells us that out in society, in these epidemiological studies that measure what happens in society, they now show that if you have a cell tower within 500 meters or 1,640 feet, you are going to see higher death rates and higher neurotoxicity and other illness rates. And that curve starts coming down at 500 meters, but it doesn't actually catch up to the normal society statistics till double that at 1,000 meters or over 3,000 feet. So to put cell towers where we are is just insane. So you can, this is my personal research repository called Understanding EMFs, because I didn't understand what electromagnetic fields were. And so being a tech writer, I just started categorizing things. And as I found good resources, I would just add them here by bullet point. So it's quick to skim. And I use it to get back to important information that I later want to share or go back and double check myself. So if anything that I have built is useful to use, please feel free to use it as a launch point. So look at the non-industry funded science. Look at antennasearch.com here in the US. You can put in any address and it will give you a return of most of the cell towers, the big ones, the macro cells and the antennas that are mounted elsewhere within a 3-mile radius. So I just looked recently at my home address in Ashland. Within 3 miles, I think I had like, a couple hundred antennas and several dozen cell towers. And then when I put in the address for our state house right in downtown Boston, there were 1 1,520 towers and more than 4,500 of these antennas. And these are just the big ones, and they push that signal for miles. So our cities have just become so electro-polluted. And here's an example of one of the Boston neighborhoods in Hyde Park. Look how densified those cell towers are. It's unconscionable what industry has done. Let's fix it. But now, in addition to all that electro pollution, there's a new added layer that has come in. And these are these 5G small cell antennas. So what is 5G? Fifth generation technology. They're promising those faster entertainment downloads, smart cities, super highways, and no, they are buying up the entertainment industry. But 5G can't fly on its own. So right now, if you have a device that's pulling signal from a cell tower or your neighbor's router, that gets to you because it's using these long pulses of waves. Those can enter the building. All that's left to monetize are these little tiny millimeter microwaves, and they get disrupted by stuff in their path, like trees, like snow or rain, or buildings or mountains. So 5G can't fly on its own because there's these dinky little crummy millimeter waves. So now the industry is combining all these frequencies together and bringing them at very, very close range outside of our homes. And their goal, because these signals don't travel far, is to put millions of these every 2 to 12 houses inside our neighborhoods, right at bedroom height. Or they're slipping in on the wires if there's no poles, or they're putting them under manhole covers. So they're very sneaky. And that is what 5G is. And here we are at a time where our communities are investing in rebuilding up the tree canopies to counteract climate change, to try and cool our streets and our cities. And here comes the industry, and they are clear cutting the trees so that their little signals will get through. Now, Senator Richard Blumenthal out of Connecticut up in Washington, D.C., he was at a Commerce Committee hearing, and he said to the industry, so share with us, how much money has industry invested in independent, not industry-funded science to prove that 5G was safe before bringing it to market? And these two industry gentlemen kind of did the hamana, 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 and then finally had to say, we don't actually know of any funded studies. So Senator Blumenthal said, so as far as health and safety is concerned, we're flying blind here. And to add insult to injury, Computer World and others are out there doing speed tests and saying, hey, wait a minute, 5G isn't even any faster than what we already had with 4G. What's the deal here? So it's just more revenue for the industry. And there went Verizon last year announcing, hey, we're going to be bringing, 5G to 100 million Americans. And then Dr. Beverly Rubik, who's a medical doctor and researcher, and Dr. Rob Brown, who's a radiologist, they started looking at the data on COVID-19 and other illnesses and saw that there is evidence, a statistically significant evidence for a connection between COVID-19 and exposure to radio frequency radiation, including 5G. And I got into a rough spot with my state legislator, Patrick Lewis, on this because I lost him, and I saw him at our farmer's market, and I said, Pat, where did I lose you on this? And he goes, it was when you talked about COVID. And I said, but wait, you have to look at the science. I'm not saying COVID-19 was caused by 5G. I'm saying that our biological cells only have so much energy. And then when you add on all this microwave radiation pulsating 24/7, we are down a cord already. And then when you add a virus on top of it, our immune system can't fight it very well. So that's an extraordinary report that came out, because normally in science, before something gets published in a medical journal, you have to have it peer reviewed. So you get experts in this field, 2 or 3 of them, to look at your paper and assure that it was done scientifically sound. So on this particular paper, they didn't have, 2 or 3 experts. They had 15 or 16 experts weigh in on this paper before it got published. So it's solid. Not popular, but it's solid. So this map here is Boston. That's not even the 4,500 macro cell antennas. This is just the inundation of 5G small cells. So they're doing this to all of our cities, and God bless Dr. Magda Havas. She is a professor emeritus out of Trent University in Canada, where she taught electromagnetic fields for 25 years, and she's the co-chair of the EMF Medical Conference. She recognizes that most governments have dropped the ball and nobody's measuring this cumulative outdoor toxin that we are now immersed in. So Dr. Havas has what she calls her BRAG project, for a nickname, but it's her Global EMF Monitoring Project. And she invites you and I as citizen scientists, anybody who can get their hands on the Safe and Sound Pro 2 meter from the medical conference can participate in her scientific research. So she has us take these sheets that she, data collection points. So we go out into the community, you bring a buddy, so one of you can run the measurements the way they show you to measure, and then the other can write down the data, and then you enter it into her database. And then she will tag your city as in the black, 100,000 microwatts or more outdoors, in the red, 10,000 and up to 100,000. A is for amber, 1,000 to 10,000, or G is for green, 100,000 or less. Now, we talked about being at 10 or less at our home, but provided we don't spend time directly under one of these antennas outdoors, even if the ambient radiation outdoor were 1,000 or less and we had a clean, safe detox area at night, maybe we could do all right with 1,000 or less outdoors. And those guidelines were set by scientists in Salzburg at a convention some years back. So anybody who would like to be a citizen scientist, you can go to globalemf.net and say, do the contact me and tell them that you would like to participate in this. And Rob Metzinger, who owns Safe Living Technologies, is offering a discount to anybody who will sign up to be a citizen scientist. So you can say, I'd like to participate. Can I please have the code for the discount? And I think when I did it, it was 20 or 25% off. And that's significant on a $400 meter. So we hope citizens will help Dr. Havas with her research there. All right. So what do some real outdoor measurements look like today? We want to be at 1,000 or less. Lori Schreier went over to her fire department in Westmoreland. They were in the green. In Keene, New Hampshire, pre-pandemic, they were already inching up into the amber. And now we know that since then, they have turned on small cells right at the curb outside people's homes and businesses. So we suspect that needs to be updated and remeasured. Nashua was already in the red. Here at their state capitol, when Deb and I measured, this was during the pandemic, so it was like a ghost town. So very few people driving around with their cars radiating and the people inside with their devices radiating, very few pedestrians with their devices radiating, and we were already in the red zone. Stratham, New Hampshire, where Deb and Representative Abrami live, already in the hundreds of thousands. They put a massive cell tower right up on their main drag. And here's a picture from the North End in Boston. For anybody who's had the privilege of going there, that's where these amazing Italian restaurants and bakeries are. But people live in the apartments up above. And this looks like a beautiful wrought iron lamppost. It's actually a cell tower right there on the sidewalk where thousands of tourists go every year. And then if you walk down Hanover Street, you'll see all these pretty ones every few feet. And then when you look at the crossroads down, what you see are these ugly gray monopoles just shooting up out of the sidewalk right outside people's bedroom windows. So this is the reality of what industry is doing if we don't get ahead of this. And we'll be sharing some resources Now, Martin Luther King Jr. taught us when we finally make important changes in society, it comes through three channels. One is what we're doing here with you, and that is to educate and engage the public and perhaps inspire you to start taking baby steps to protect yourself and then go further out into your community. It goes through the courts, and we'll show you some fine examples of what's happening now. And then ultimately, public policy catches up, in this case, to the science and starts protecting the public. So in the remainder of my slides, I'll leave them with you when we send out our follow-up, and you can drill down into what interests you most. I'll step you through some of the highlights, but please know there is such solid information on all of this. And I hope that by helping you connect the dots, it will empower you to take control of what you can. So remember that $30 million study that the FDA commissioned the National Toxicology Program to do that found clear evidence of cancerous tumors and DNA damage. That was supposed to trigger public policy to protect us. But when Dr. Shuren from the FDA went over to the FCC and said, we don't believe that study, let's keep doing what we've been doing. Once the FCC took that advice from the FDA, they had to put it in formally. And so they put in something called the Federal Register that they saw no reason why they should update their public radiation exposure limits that are archaic from 1996 and were never based on science. So once that Federal Register notice hit, then the lawsuits started happening. The Environmental Health Trust sued, Children's Health Defense sued, and other parties across the country sued. It was all combined into one lawsuit with the DC Circuit Court of Appeals in Washington, DC. And the folks who sued spent $15,000 putting together all this evidence that was already entered into the public record with the FCC in an open docket that sat open for 6 years. So they took all this medical, scientific, and citizen evidence of harm, 11,000 pages, 27 big fat binders that they gave to these three judges in DC. And the judges are reading the science and looking at the attorneys for the FCC going, how did you determine that radiation exposure limit is still okay decades later? And the FCC attorneys went, well, the FDA said it was okay. So of course the judges asked, where is the homework by the FDA? And they have none. None of our federal agencies have done the analysis on the scientific evidence. So we have a huge regulatory gap. So the FCC got sued, they lost. The court came back and said, we find you to be arbitrary and capricious. And I had to go look that up, but it basically means they just made it up when they decided they're not going to change their radiation. So apparently our court systems don't like to tell our federal agencies what they have to do. They want to give them the first chance to get in there and make it right. And it's been now 2 years and 4 months, and the FCC has not done one thing to respond to the court order to account not just for cancers, but for electrohypersensitivity, for infertility, for the impact on children, the elderly, the environment, all of it. The FCC's done nothing. So there is no cavalry coming. We have got to bring this in at the local level. So there have been lawsuits happening all over. So one of the best documents we have is from Pittsfield, Massachusetts. It took 18 months of citizens crying out that they had been so injured that they had to leave their homes because the children were vomiting in their beds. They were having skin rashes. They couldn't sleep. People were having the ringing in the ears desperately. People whose cancers had gone away came back when Verizon turned a cell tower on top of this neighborhood. They turned on 6 antennas and the thing is licensed for 48, and 6 were so potent that ultimately their board of health got engaged and determined through doctors' consultations, through consultations with scientists and engineers and listening to the industry, they determined that these homes were no longer habitable. And they wrote this emergency order to Verizon to come to the table and see how they can sort this out. There was already another property owner in Pittsfield who said, look, we have commercial property. You can move your cell tower here. It wouldn't be near anybody else. But the industry doesn't want to set any kind of precedent. So they went to court and fought it. And meanwhile, their Board of Health had gone up to the state level here, to the Massachusetts Association of Health Boards, and consulted with their attorneys. And we think what they figured out is that although the FCC does have this 1996 Telecom Act that says if anybody complains about the environment, which a couple of the courts have said also means human harm, then there's nothing you can do. So that's what industry has been telling our towns all along. But what our health board in Pittsfield has determined is that that only applies to the application process and the siting of the equipment. Once something comes into the community that is either a nuisance or is causing harm to people or the environment, it is the legal obligation of the Board of Health to fix that. So the Board of Health had gone to the state experts and said, you know, what would it cost us to take this to court if that's the way we have to go? And there were two different pathways. They added up to like $80,000 some odd dollars, which for a big town is not a terrible thing. They've got those emergency funds. And mind you, it was the mayor and the city council that ordered their Board of Health to investigate. The Board of Health did their job. They got to the bottom of it. And then the mayor and the city council, certain members would not back up their own Board of Health. They bullied their Board of Health into rescinding that emergency order. So now, with great thanks to Children's Health Defense, there is a civil lawsuit against the town of the city of Pittsfield to get that emergency order reinstated so the Board of Health can do its job. And the attorneys all have to put preliminary information into the record so the judge can determine whether this is worth spending time on or not. And the judge did determine that they are allowing this case to move forward. So we are waiting in the coming months to get a ruling on that case, and this could be a game changer. So lots of important court cases happening all over the country, all over the world, and folks are welcome to go dive in deeper. So Martin Luther King Jr. said, people need to be informed and speak up. It goes through the courts and then it goes through public policy. So we'll teach us some of the highlights going on there. Here's the highlights from the bill that Deb's Rep. Abrami. Why has the insurance industry long since recognized this as a world leading risk on par with asbestos and lead and all that other stuff? Why do they put exclusions in their policy and they don't cover for damages? Why does that legal fine print even exist if this is fine? Why is the FCC ignoring thousands of high quality studies? And why are they only looking at the heating effect? Why are they completely turning their backs on the non-thermal, non-ionizing biological effects? And why does our country, which is where so much of this technology comes from, why do we allow 100 times more radiation than other countries are doing? And why is nobody looking at the cumulative effect of this? Because think of a child in a classroom with 30 classmates, with 30 radiating devices, with wireless access points on the ceiling, with smart boards, with minis, with people's individual devices, their wearables. It is so toxic in our schools right now. But we helped bring the experts to New Hampshire, and in less than a year, in 7 months, this bill went through favorably in the House, it went through the Senate, and then under the governor's pen. By law, they had to form a commission of experts, investigate this, and come out with a report. And this groundbreaking report is right up there with the Pittsfield emergency order. Probably the best document in our country because it documents all of the conflicts of interest with the FDA and the FCC. This commission invited them to come meet with them and they refused. They just kept pointing to the corrupt information posted on their federal websites. So that's all documented in here. And then 15 recommendations indicating that wireless is no longer advanced technology. We need to be investing in our communities to bring fiber optics to and through the premises for primary connectivity, and then reserve wireless signals to be used sparingly when on the go, and never, ever inside of our homes or our schools or our houses of worship or our public buildings. Everything should be hardwired. And we should be putting signs up on everything that's radiating, big signs at eye level, so we know not to spend time hanging out under these street level cell towers. So it's an incredible report with 15 recommendations. Dr. Kent Chamberlain was the chair at the University of New Hampshire of their Department of Computer and Electrical Engineering. He had been developing medical devices using radio frequency for years. And he thought all of this technology must be safe, right? Because we're doing it. He did the deep dive into the science, and now he's got a wonderful 20-minute presentation there on what they found and his slides. So again, don't take anybody's word. Go into the slides and drill down to the facts for yourself. So a very transparent process from that end of it in New Hampshire. And then they started writing bills to enact what the recommendations are. And I'll tell you, every single time they get a good bill going, the industry comes in and torpedoes it. So we have tried for 2 legislative sessions. Maine had a good bill this session. Connecticut had a good bill this session. We have 6 bills this session. A commission bill, like we inspired New Hampshire to do. Ours has been around now for 8 years, has never passed. Senate 156 to protect kids from handheld devices. We have a bill to start protecting everybody in the school buildings and on the playing fields. And now we have an emergency bill that's been around for 10 years because National Grid and Eversource are telling our towns and our Department of Public Utilities that their electric meters are aging out. So in 2024 and 2025, they want to replace them all with smart meters, which is well, it's just not a good, it's not a smart solution. We need to bring fiber optics to the premises, hook the meters in through that, and then there's no radiation, and we remove a lot of the other risks. In the meantime, though, everybody today with any transmitting device on their home deserves to have a no-fee opt-out, and that's what this bill would give us. And then we have a new bill that would recognize that in our civil rights legislation, it's not enough anymore to just require handicap or disability access through a wheelchair ramp. We have all these other invisible environmental disabilities. So for example, we just learned recently that up in Canada, one of the big conglomerate grocery store chains up there started setting aside certain hours for people with sensory illnesses. So think about people on the ADD, ADHD spectrum or the autism spectrum or Asperger's spectrum who get dysregulated when they're in an environment that has high stimulation. And so now Walmart has recently announced that from 8 to 10 a.m. they have low sensory shopping. So they kill the music, they dim down the lights, they put a hold on any noisy activities like gathering up the crashing grocery carts and stuff. And they try to create as calm and peaceful as an environment as they can so people with sensory issues can access what they need to live. So we're hoping that this will go much further, and this civil rights bill addresses all these new ways that business is being done, and everybody has to have access, if they're going through technology even, to access what they need to live in this world. So that's a great bill. And then there's this bill from the legislator who lives in the neighborhood where the Verizon cell tower went up. Right now, people are getting sick left and right all over the country, all over the world, and they have no way to capture that data. So we already have MAVEN, which is the Massachusetts registry, where if somebody has food poisoning or Parkinson's or COVID, all that gets entered by our healthcare practitioners and our local boards of health and health agents. We are now simply asking that electromagnetic sensitivity be recognized and tracked in that database. With better data, we can make better public health policy. So lots happening, and there are bills in other states that you are more than welcome to go take a look at. So industry commonly comes into our towns and say, oh, it's fine, ignore the NIMBYs, not in my backyards, nobody else cares, which is, again, another pathway of disinformation that they commonly give to our towns. If you go out to Americans for Responsible Technology, you will find there are more than 150 groups already formed all over the country, boots on the ground, working hard on this. And if there's not a group in your area, there's a whole toolkit here where they will tell you how to get started. So, people are successfully fighting this. You need to get your local zoning code up to speed so industry cannot just come in and roll over you. Industry tells our towns your hands are tied. We know legally that is not true. You might have one pinky finger tied, but there are many stipulations you can put in your town's local zoning bylaw to make it very difficult for them to put toxic technology anywhere near where we are. So be inspired by those who've already done it. Know that towns are now speaking up, and we need to encourage our towns to speak up to the state agencies, to the federal agencies, and get this fixed. So great examples that you can drill down into, and it's happening all over. People are doing this, and they are getting it right. So be inspired. But seriously, folks, we cannot keep radiating our kids. Louisiana, a group of doctors banded together, and they see how we've gone to the extremes with technology, and we need to strike that balance. First of all, let's hardwire it and make it safe. It's hard to go up and get a law that says we're going to hardwire. So what they did is each doctor took it from where their specialty is. The ophthalmologist sees that we now have epidemic levels of myopia, which is changing the shape of the eyes because we're in the shallows of screens all the time. We're not outside. We're not scanning the horizon, which keeps our eyeballs round. So best practices for digital devices. They passed a law unanimously to get these, and their local board of health or their state health agency helped to formulate these. So this is new and beautiful to share. In the Netherlands, Finland, Sweden, and elsewhere, they are taking the technology out of the classrooms because we got sold a bill of goods. Children are not learning best through screens. They're learning best through human contact, through movement, through meaningful interaction with their environment and with their peers and trusted adults. That's how a child properly develops, not through the shallows of a screen. So the New York Times did a 3-part expose some years ago on what Silicon Valley executives are doing. They're sending their children to school with no technology. So why are they still pushing it in on our kids? So bless our friends at the Grassroots Environmental Education nonprofit. They have Americans for Responsible Technology as a project. They also develop tech-safe schools for you to open this conversation with your town. Tell them where you are. They will send out a packet of the health, the legal risks, and how to remediate. So we have so many tools. The Massachusetts Breast Cancer Coalition has already written K through 12 curriculum. Dr. McKnight and I were brought in to do professional development on Health and Wellness Day. We presented 4 different times that day. And here's a recording that can be used in your schools, or we can be brought in to help. My little nonprofit with Dr. Mikko Ahonen out of Finland, we've got online courses that can be taken in about a half an hour to train your entire school district. It will allow you to print out a tip sheet at the end, as well as a certificate of completion to give to your human resources departments so that they too can track who's been trained. So all these incredible resources left and right that most people have no idea exist. And then for every profession, we can teach what to do. We have the first medical school textbook came out from Dr. Panagopoulos in Greece, and his colleague experts all over the world wrote different chapters of this textbook. So we can now train our doctors, our nurses, and other healthcare practitioners. It's called Electromagnetic Fields of Wireless Communications, Biological and Health Effects. So if people are saying there's no evidence of harm, point them to this textbook, point them to the EMF Medical Conference, point them to Dr. Cindy Russell's website, Physicians for Safe Technology, where all the science, all the political actions, all the lawsuits, Dr. Russell has them all teed up there very credibly. And then for our engineers, our physicists, our technologists, our architects, our urban planners, one of the outputs of that conference we were brought down to at the National Institutes of Health is they did a call for papers. So Frank Clegg from Microsoft Canada partnered with many of the world leading experts, and they came out with this amazing paper that was peer reviewed and published on building science and radio frequency radiation, what makes truly smart and healthy buildings. So that's a great resource. Dr. Paul Heroux and others, Dr. Kent Chamberlain, partnered together to talk about engineering solutions, cell phone radiation exposure limits, and engineering solutions. And then here's Jeremy's TED Talk, and then I've got a page in my research repository specifically for engineers and physicists, because we know what they've been told, we know what they were taught in school, but they need to update their skill set with what is actually going on today. So solutions at every turn. For you at home and work, if you're not a do-it-yourselfer, then go into the back of your router and getting Ethernet cables and adapters might be overwhelming. We get that. There are professionals you can call. Any electrician can come in and just hardwire your house. They know how to do that. You don't even have to tell them why. Just say, I want an Ethernet jack in this room. I want an Ethernet jack in that room. They'll do that. You just plug in the wires. There are also highly trained professionals called building biologists who have been through rigorous training. Many can come in and test everything in your home, from mold to VOCs, formaldehyde, other forms of off-gassing from carpeting. And they can test your water. And there are those who have gotten their certification to do electromagnetic radiation specialties. So they can be brought in. Sometimes they're few and far between. Sometimes you'll luck out and there's one right in your area, but go to their directory, and many of them will consult with you online. They'll send you the equipment you need, have you do the tests, and then they will give you the analysis. This film, Generation Zapped, came out in 2018, and it was chosen as part of the United Nations Film Festival. It won Best Documentary at several film festivals. And in 74 minutes, you can sit down with your loved ones or do it at a lunch and learn at work. And in 74 minutes, you will have a really good handle of what's going on with this issue. And then send people my way, and we can bring you up to speed with what has happened since that film was released in 2018. Bert Wolf on PBS has done 2 episodes. Great thanks to Camilla Reese and Dr. Erica Mallory Blythe, but 2 half-hour episodes. Anybody can go watch them. And then here's the toolkit for you to work with to get this going for yourself in your own home, in your community, and then rippling up there to your state agencies and your legislators. So we have to remember we are the example for the children in our world. So they're big fans of monkey see, monkey do. They see you on your screens all the time. You just gave them permission to do the same. They need you. They need me, and they need their natural environment. So let's learn to go back and do the important things in our lives that we sort of gave up when we started falling into the shallows of the screen. So this poster here has got some great tips. Let's model good behavior. And then Dr. Laura Conover, there's a depth of research on grounding or earthing, how the Earth's natural healing energy comes to us at 7.83 times per second. We're all meant to be connected with that healing energy. That's called Schumann's resonance. And when we got fancy with man-made energy, instead of 8 times a second, Our microwaves are coming at us in the megahertz range at 1,000,000 times per second, and in the gigahertz range, 1,000,000,000 times per second. So we're really letting ourselves get overpowered and carried away with this man-made energy until we know better, and then we can do better. So I love Dr. Conover's book because, you know, I live in the Northeastern. I can't be out walking around barefoot for half the year, but she takes it through all the 4 seasons and gives us dozens of ways each season to naturally connect with the earth's healing energy. So please take a look at that if it interests you, in her book, The Earth Prescription. So here's what we need to help our towns with. Right now, the CDC, or Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, they've got already a set of principles called the ALARA principle for ionizing radiation. That's the sun, the gamma rays, the X-rays, all of that. 3 prongs. 1, spend as little time radiating yourself as you can. 2, create as much distance as you can. And 3, if you can't get away from it, you better shield yourself from it because it's cumulative. And that's why we wear an X-ray, an apron, a lead apron to get an X-ray, right? We would never leave our kids out in the sun 24/7, right? We can't leave our plants 24/7 in the light because we're all going off of the light and dark circadian rhythm. So we need to get away from radiating ourselves with this man-made low-level non-ionizing radiation. So let's see if we can get to as low as reasonably achievable. Here's resources for our municipal leaders. This free book online called Reinventing Wires talks about all the risks and why it's so much better for our communities to bring high-speed copper and cable right to the building where we just simply hook up with cables on the indoors. So not rocket science to fix, but critically important. We prioritize the public's interests over industry and what they just keep pushing at us. And then it's always critical to measure, not against the corrupt FCC limits, but against what we know biologically we need, and we know those established limits. So next step, don't kid ourselves. There's no safe level of man-made radiation. As Dr. Birnbaum, who retired from the head of the National Institutes of Environmental Health Sciences, tells us, yeah, there's a lot of corruption up at the federal level, but there are some really good public servants, but they need to be empowered from the local level up through the state level and up through the federal level. So that's on us. That's our job as citizens. So let's keep educating the public. Join us for these education sessions. We can pull together local, town, sponsored programs. We've done it. You can look at those. And please, everybody, step up. Don't turn a blind eye any longer. Let's start by protecting the kids in the schools. There's no law prohibiting us from doing that. And then start where you are. If you belong to a professional group and you're looking for speakers, let me know. This is my happy place. I love getting out and teaching people because tonight they could choose to create a sleep sanctuary. Today, they could keep their devices in airplane mode until they need to use it. So let's get tech safety committees formed in our towns. Let's make sure our towns are not forcing toxic smart meters on us and make our way to hardwired safe technology. And our town should not be afraid to hire an expert. Most of our town attorneys do not have telecom law expertise. Somebody like Andrew Campanelli does. In the toolkit with Americans for Responsible Technology, they've got samples of what good code looks like. They've got checklists, and they've got real code that's been enacted into law that our towns can start working off of. So for today, just start noticing what is radiating. Start with baby steps. Be gentle because we didn't know. So let's not get angry with people. Let's just work towards solutions. Create that sleep sanctuary so your body can try and repair. Work your way toward Ethernet cables and adapters and be in airplane mode on every antenna you come across until you need that one antenna. And then go to Environmental Health Trust. They've got pages of incredible resources that you can be hanging up around your work, your office, your medical facilities. And thank you for listening in. Again, my apologies. New Hampshire for Safe Technology, who partnered with us tonight. They also have a website, or I'm sorry, a Facebook page, and they refer people over to the Mass for Safe Tech website to get to the data. And they also have an email address that Deb, if she's still with us, can pop into the chat. So thank you, everybody. I will stop sharing the screen right now. And Deb, if you can let us know if there's been any questions in the chat that we might address, or if anybody wants to raise their hand or unmute themselves, we'd be happy to answer any questions. Sydney, go ahead. Oh, you're muted, hon.
I'm glad I got to listen to most of this. I had to go to the post office and do all this Christmas stuff, but it was great. You know, there's so many wonderful links because every time I listen to you, I make all these screen captures. And then I think, oh, wait a minute, I should be looking at the links. And then I have to remember where was the URL. So I know I went to your YouTube page. I was looking, it says that the slides are there, but I mean, where are they on the YouTube? I mean, you just click
If
on.
you just click on more information right under the video in the description.
Oh, okay.
Click on more information and there's, you know, more to read there. And then usually down toward the bottom is the link to my slides.
Okay, so you click on, so I see all the little icons.
Mhm.
And then, you know, with it shows like how much time it is and all that. But how do you get, so you click on it and then it brings it up and then you go for more information?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll try that. Thank you.
Yeah, give it, and if not, just let me know. We can help you find them.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Sydney, all the way from California. All right, any other questions or comments folks would like to share?
Oh, one more thing.
You go.
This was so interesting. When I was listening to you the other day and you mentioned about much lower levels in India, or they have a different kind of requirements. Right as you were ending, it was 10, I had to leave a little early for that other meeting, for Odette's meeting, but the phone rang and I picked it up and it was Satya Giordano. He's a building biologist in our area. And I said, oh, it's amazing that you're calling me, because I left him a message asking if he knew of an electrical engineer that we could employ to do some work and check out some cell towers. And he said that he was getting back to me, and he says, I'm calling from India. I said, oh, you're in India. I can ask you the question. I said, did you bring your meter with you? He says, yes. I said, is it true? Do they really have lower levels? He said, unfortunately, not from what I've seen. If they do, they're not enforcing them, because there are cell towers everywhere. And in fact, said even his coconut, the guy he buys his coconuts from on, you know, every other day or every whatever, he said he even has a phone and he uses the app on his phone if you want to pay for a coconut. He said, everybody's got a phone, cell towers everywhere, and he couldn't wait to get home.
Yeah, it's just such a predatory industry. So on paper, they have taken their public radiation exposure limits, but they too are captured by industry. So enforcement is a whole nother can of worms.
That's the problem. Enforcement is the can of worms.
Yeah, so we keep trying, and you know, some days are really just raw and awful, but we get up the next day and say, hey, if we can help one person learn to be more safe with the stuff that is under their control, then that's a good day. And then we keep working on public policy and the court cases, because those are coming too. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. Boo. All right. Any other questions or comments before we say goodnight?
Yes.
And happy holidays?
Yes, hold on. Tom would like to speak.
Tom, go ahead and unmute.
Not sure he knows how to, and for some reason, I'm having trouble unmuting him.
Yeah, I don't seem to have that option. Let me see. Yeah, it
That's
just keeps saying
weird.
ask to unmute.
I know, but usually I can unmute everyone.
Unmute.
I'm not sure
How
what's
about now?
Oh,
Okay,
How about
Tom,
now?
that's it.
you did it.
Okay,
job.
yeah, my name's Tom Haney. Good afternoon from Las Vegas. My father, Area 51, Goodyear Aerospace, Skunk Works, World War II, radar, microwave, and RF. We had a
Mhm.
40-year business here, so I have a background in this from hell. He was a component level tech. We have a DoD contract here. You can look it up, people. It's called Ericsson 5G experiment, Las Vegas, Nellis Air Force Base. And we are being irradiated. Tri-field, I have an SLT and a tri-field. I'm in touch with Scott McCulloch, which is with RFK with the Children's Health Defense. I've already got his cell phone number. I was engaging all the installers here for the last 4 years of this DoD contract. And they have 2 years training and working on the towers hot. That's just for starters. I have more information. I want to launch this thing out of Vegas because of this DoD contract, and they forced it down our throat. I was opening campaign headquarters here at 9 years old. I've been in Vegas 60 years when there was nothing here. I'm not bragging or trying to be arrogant or pompous people. I grew up with the families that built this place, and my father worked Area 51, and he was dropping our nukes 1.5 miles and wiring up the analytics. I'm one of those guys.
Oh, I'm so
Um,
sorry, Tom. Yeah, it's really rough. One of the other members of New
My point is,
Hampshire.
you guys did a wonderful job. I'm all over what you said. This was the best presentation I've seen. I took
Oh.
snapshots of everything that you put up, and I've already sent them out to my people. Tri-field gave me 20 meters. They're scattered all over the state. We've been collecting data for over 1.5 years.
Excellent.
Yes,
Excellent. Well,
this is where all of our politicians, we hit a block wall. And I've got the shirts, I'm the Safe Schools Project, K through 12, microwave radiation monitoring, free 5G radiation monitoring meters. I give them to people. They keep them for a week, and I've been storing all the data for the lawsuits. Yes.
good for
Yep.
you. Good for you,
So,
Tom.
anyway, if you people would love, it takes this, it takes the world to get this going because they railroaded us. The FCC lied, just like the CDC and the FDA did with the jabs and the swabs. It's all the same. I agree with you. We're all on the same page. Fair enough.
Well, thank you for everything that you're doing out there, Tom. I'm glad you're connected with the legal experts and others. And we
Yeah,
hear
you
this
did a
time
great
and
job
again.
because I've been sending that as you've been putting them out. I'm giving to most of the people that know anything about this. It's exactly what you said. They're
Yeah.
either dead or they changed the rules and nobody knows. You nailed
That's
it.
it.
You
So
nailed it.
that's why we just got to keep doing what we're doing and educate at the grassroots level. And I love that you're giving those meters out. I just did the same thing when I testified. I think
Yes.
it was before the Joint Committee on Education. I left them with a meter that Rob Metzinger had given to me. And I gave it to him for a month and I went to collect it from the House office. And they said, oh, wait, did Senate Chair Lewis, did he return it? So that was encouraging to know that both the House and the Senate took that.
So follow this, people. My plan is emergency funding. I'm sure you heard about our Formula One race here about a month ago. What a joke. They spent $500 million on it, never got their money out of it. Our town is still screwed up they're still tearing down all the stuff on the strip. It's a mess. They screwed up the town here for 3 months. And at that point, I wanted emergency funding. We're going after to where I give 5 meters per school. We have about 450, we're the 5th largest school district. I was trying to use the mama bears so in the morning they could, when they're walking their kids to school, they could take the radiation levels at the schools, what have you. I'm going for the teachers. The parents are so overwhelmed with our economy, the kids in school, the soccer, everything else. And then they drop the meters, they become a toy. I want to get 5 meters per school, emergency funding, and hold their feet to the fire when they start tearing this stuff out from RFK's people, Scott McCulloch, that they're getting this stuff torn down by the schools because they put it up while we were locked down, as you're fully aware, correct?
Yeah, well, keep us abreast, Tom. I'd love to hear how you make out. I love the idea of putting the meter in schools. And if you get that funding, just,
It's chump change. It's like 800K.
yeah.
Who can, that's chump change to the school district.
Mm.
The way we're doing it, just so you know, the way we plan on doing it, the county commission in each county, the school district, the school district union, the city, county, and state, they all chip in because it's their responsibility, accountability to hold these people to the fire.
Are they actually doing it, or is this what you hope will?
We're just, I would love you to speak February 8th, if you would. We'd like numerous speakers. We're holding it once a month, once a week, online, just like you're doing here in Las Vegas.
Yeah,
And if anybody would like my number, with any of the specialists, because we can't trust any of our free letter, federal agencies. We just
Right.
can't. They're,
right.
my number
Well,
is
listen,
702.
Tom, I think you have
Yep.
my email address. Can you shoot me an email with that date and I will check my calendar? I'd be honored to help educate if I can help. And,
Could you do me a favor? I'm 65 and I'm pretty good with the phone. And, but I mean, I text and I get instant results. I text Scott McCullough direct with all my information.
yeah, I don't
He gets
use
a
a
direct
cell
with-
phone, Tom.
There's a few of you out there. Do you know?
Me too.
Yeah, there's a few of you out there. Did you know, the lady, I'm sure you possibly do, she was part of the win with the ETF or whatever.
Yeah, Theodora Scarrato, Deborah Davis.
Hold on here. I got it right here.
Daphne,
Well, it was the Aaron Brockovich firm joined Citizens lawsuit. It was 5G. She ran for Congress. Oh God, it's on the tip of my freaking, it's in my book here. God, I've got everything professionally done. But anyway, you're over the target and I would love for you to get involved, please. Somebody help.
Okay.
You want my
So,
email real
wait,
quick?
Tom, let me back up a sec. Do you not use
Yep.
email at all?
Oh, okay.
Well,
Don't.
do you not use email at all?
Oh, no, I use email. It just gets lost in about 250 emails a day. And then if
Yeah.
I don't recognize it, I'm immediately, wiping it off.
Yeah, so do this.
And I don't
You
want to wipe
have-
you off.
You have my email address. Shoot me an email address and propose that date of February 8th. I'll check my calendar and I'll let you know if I can join you, okay?
That'd be great. Great job,
Super.
people. Just very well informed and I was snapshotting everything on the information. That was wonderful.
Okay, and you'll get my slides, so you'll have the full thing.
Do you actually have this? I would just, you'll be able to ask questions. We plan on putting a group together naturally, but we're going after the HOAs. And the
Good.
reason the HOAs are, they're massive here. One of them has 100,000 up in Summerlin here, high rent district. I live up on the side of the hill here in Las Vegas and Henderson, all high end.
Mhm.
Not bragging again. We worked our ass off. We had a 40-year business here, 7 days a week. And the people are going to have a change of face here with who they elected. We're so dirty here. It's pathetic. We had Harry Reid.
Yeah.
We call him Dirty Harry. I'm
But
sorry.
you know
I'm
what?
just,
You're doing the right thing. You're getting the
Yes.
citizens informed. You'll get them organized and we'll just be
Yes.
cheering for you. But we got to wrap this up. I'm so glad you
Thank you.
raised your hand.
I
Yes.
think Sydney has one more question.
I just had a question, and this has to do with a cell tower that's proposed for some right near homes in Santa Rosa, right behind Costco. I was looking at the specs. It's going to be 12 antennas, 6-foot antennas, and we have all the specs, and each one is emitting at multiple frequencies. However, they're also saying that they're going to have 8 radio units, and I've been investigating what a radio unit is, but not, it's an Ericsson radio unit, so I have all the specs
Yep.
from the.
Tom really knows.
Yeah, I want to know what exactly a radio unit, it says it's not emitting RFR. Do these radio units not emit RFR? Does anyone know about these Ericsson radio units? Tom? No?
I'll tell you what I know. That's the contract was with Ericsson, with the DoD contract here. With
Yes.
Verizon, T-Mobile, all of them. We are literally saturated in this town and they tuned everything up.
Mhm.
And they had 8,500 workers here because there's 5 naval bases. Coronado is in California, and we have the one here at Nellis Air Force Base, 15 miles from me. I have all the audio and video of both of the meters on the test site and what they call the human connection with our police department. that's all connected with the cable company, Dish Network, Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile. Yes, they're all guilty. All of them.
Okay, so that's I really want to know exactly, well, I'll do some more research into what this radio unit is. But the other question, I mean, the other comment I have is that they say they also have a millimeter wave unit, antenna, whatever. And I thought, well, what's the millimeter wave? And you know what? It's 11 gigahertz. Now, our Safe and Sound Pros go to 10. And the millimeter wave meter goes from 20 to 40 too, I think. Nothing.
It
Mhm.
sounds like that might be in the C band for military.
So the
use.
C band is between 2 and 4 gigahertz. It's past the C band. It's the millimeter wave, which is not C band. And it's 11 gigahertz, but our meters won't read at 11 gigahertz.
That's
And
correct. That's,
what I was told
and
is
by the
that
way,
that's for the
listen,
military area. That's the military or government, I was told by Safe
Yeah.
Living.
Scott McCullough has that stuff that we're bringing to Vegas as soon as we can. And it's the spectrum analyzers that are like they use at Creech and Nellis. It's military equipment. Yes, it is.
Okay, I just want
That,
to. That's
yes.
all. Thank you. Military, I thought it was military, but I mean, now
Yes, it is.
that's the second macro tower, Verizon macro tower that has that millimeter wave military capability on it. The second permit that's been applied for, there's another one closer to the coast. Both of them have that millimeter wave 11 gigahertz meter, I'm sorry, antenna.
The sweet spot for the graphene oxide is 26 gigahertz. Yes.
Okay, anyway,
With the, yeah. Yep.
All right.
I can
All
go.
right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for sharing that information, and folks are welcome to connect offline as well if there's more information to share. And we thank you for your 2 hours plus tonight, and we hope that you all have safe holidays and good health in the new year. And we'll be back in touch soon. Deb, thank you
Great
again
job.
so much for co-hosting.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Cece.
All righty, bye-bye.
Take care.